Hi, this is Jennifer Ryan, and I just want to say thank you very much for having me here today, and for reading the book, being interested in the book. Um, I just want to say first of all that a little bit about the inspiration for the book, which was from my grandmother. I had two grandmothers growing up, and one we called Party Granny, and the other one we called Shakespeare Granny. Shakespeare Granny was a very serious lady who loved doing all the tragedies with us, and Party Granny was just a complete hoot. She really was. She loved parties. Nothing better than putting on a nice dress and wearing high heels and tottering around drinking pink gin. Pink gin was her drink. It's an old naval drink. Um, Apparently it's good for warding off the malaria. Anyway, so Party Granny always had brilliant stories, many of which were about her wartime years, basically. And she'd just bring it back to life, this her little small town kind of getting together, and how all the women came together to help each other out during the war. And it's these wonderful stories that really form the basis of, and the environment really, for the Chilbury Ladies Choir. She also belonged to a choir, but actually her choir was really bad. And she would always make huge amounts of jokes about how dreadful they were, and how apparently one of their members was injured in an air raid, and they went to the hospital to visit her and to sing and to cheer her up. And so they started singing really badly. They really hammed up their singing, really, to make it really bad, just to make her laugh. And they did such a good job that the nurses took them around every ward in the hospital to cheer everybody up with their hilariously bad singing. Um, and then there's another story where they lost a carol competition. During the war, there was an awful lot of choir competitions, gardening competitions, things like that, because a lot of it was the one thing. There was these small things that really kept people cheered up, and so there was an awful lot of emphasis on them. Anyway, so they were in a carol competition and they lost because they all had blocked up noses, and instead of singing "Ding Dong Merrily on High," they sung "Dig Dog Merrily on High," which was hilarious. Anyway, she had all these amazing stories, and I just wanted to generate the kind of mood of the era that she really showed me. There was an awful lot of bravado. They were facing bombs. They were facing probable invasion at the time when Chilbury was written, which was in 1940. Um, France had just gone to the Nazis, and really the chances of England being next were huge. So, and everything that came, obviously, once, if they were invaded, there's the violence, there would be starvation, they would take all the men out to go and fight anyone who possibly could, and they would work the rest of the population incredibly brutally. Um, and so, yeah, basically, it wasn't a very nice place to live in a lot of ways. There was huge shortages, there was a lot of evacuation, a lot of people had been moved around the country, just in order to try their hardest to keep the Germans away for as long as they possibly could. And it was out of this, that people, they became incredibly resilient, and um, and it was all about sticking together and doing the very best that they could, keeping everyone as cheerful as possible. There was an awful lot of that, and getting through it. At the same time, of course, there was an awful, because you didn't know if you were going to live for another day or what was going to happen. Um, there was an awful lot of freedom for women, particularly there was no men around, and so the women were able to gad about a bit. There was a huge kind of sexual freedom as well for them. Because why save yourself for marriage when that may never happen? Or if you are already, there was an awful lot of extramarital affairs as well. A lot of babies born out of wedlock or with the wrong father. And so there was also that going on as well. Um, but basically, it was an extraordinary time of people really pulling together, and I really wanted to bring that out in the book. So um, the other thing I wanted to do quickly was to go through some of the questions that people quite often ask me in book groups um, about the book and how it was written. First of all, people ask me a lot how long it took me to write the book. So I need to give you a little bit of background about me here, which is that I used to be a non-fiction book editor. So I I've been sort of rewriting kind of, books written by other people for many years, and I always had it in my mind that, I wanted to write something, and then suddenly I just thought, this is it. I really need to do this, and I instantly knew that I wanted to write about my grandmother's stories. And so I wrote the book it took about 3 years. I was still working as well, and my kids were quite young at the time as well. So I was sort of juggling all these things, and so it took me the first draft took me a year to write, and then I edited it for another 2 years, and then it won a competition. It won the Maryland Writers Association Novel Prize, and then I kind of felt obliged to do something with it and try and get it published after that. Um, so yeah. So anyway, that's how long it took. As I say, I'm more of an editor than a writer, so that's why it took 2 years to edit it and 1 year to write it, because that's kind of how I work. Very interestingly, the first draft didn't have Miss Poultry in it, and so when I reread the first draft, I realized that it needed some more obscure character going on in there, and also kind of more interesting plot line that she might bring along with her. And Miss Poultry I'd written a short story about Miss Poultry with pretty much the same plot line, and I just suddenly realized that's exactly what I should do. I need to take that character and put her in, and she works wonderfully. And that whole plot line worked incredibly well for me. So that was incredibly lucky. Um, and yeah, but it was a case of kind of maneuvering everything and really editing it down and everything. At one point, it was about an extra half of the length that it is now, and I kind of had to cut quite a lot out. So it's been a very interesting experience, yeah. So another question that people very often ask me is what character I like best. And I have to say that this changes all the time. I think every time someone asks me, I say a different person. And I think it's because I love them all. I really do. So I think at the moment my favourite has to be Mrs. Tilling. I think I love the way that she really is such a wholesome and good person, and she really wants to be good. And at the beginning of the book, she just doesn't really have the power behind her to do that. But throughout the war, this is kind of half my intention with her character, was to really depict how women became a lot more stronger and had a lot more say in the way that their lives were. And that's really what I was trying to do with her. But I just think she's such a warm and wonderful person. It's someone that I personally would love to meet. Um, I find her just a joy, really, to write. Um, Sometimes I also answer that my favourite character is Kitty, because she's just so hilarious, and it was just so much fun to write her character, because she really does just say whatever she thinks, whatever crops into her mind at the time, which is just delightful. It really is. I had a lot of fun with that. And the way that she comes out of the traditional narrative structure as well really was really kind of made her much more exciting to write, I suppose. Venetia, I love the way she speaks. and her vernacular, that she really does hold the vernacular of the time, I think, that a young woman of her status would. And she's faced with some incredible situations, and I think she potentially has the biggest change throughout the entire book. And then, of course, Miss Poultry, who's just hilarious with her metaphors. I decided that I was going to give her the gift of metaphor, and so she uses it in great ways, like a slap around the face with a fresh caught cod is one of my favourites. So there you are. And so what did I? The other question that a lot of people write is, did I find any of the characters or any of the situations quite difficult to write? And I have to say that Sylvie was probably the most difficult because she was 10 and it's very difficult to decide what and work out exactly what a 10-year-old would and wouldn't say or do or know about the war and the whole situation back in Czechoslovakia and everything. And also writing for her as well was quite tricky because English was her second language as well. So I think she was a little bit more difficult, and also from a research point of view. Um, Obviously, as a non-fiction book editor, I'm very used to research, and I kind of know a lot of different avenues that you can go down in order to really get the best sources. But I think with Sylvie, it was a little bit more difficult to actually find sources of exactly what her and her family would have gone through back in Czechoslovakia um, during those war years. Um, so that's about it for now. Actually, I want to leave you with what I want people to take from the book, which is that life is for living. Really, I mean, it's definitely worth finding your voice and making yourself heard, but also I think this wartime feeling really reminded people that you only have one life and you really need to do whatever you can to make it the best experience and really experience it to the maximum. Um, and like the Chilbury Ladies Choir. Anyway, so I want to leave you with that. Thank you very much for your interest, and I hope you enjoy your discussion.